And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I'm going to be talking about the Commander staples that I will be putting in my Esper decks. Of course, Esper being white, black, and blue, and these traditionally are considered the control colors. It's kind of weird when you think about it because black isn't really considered a control color on its own. White isn't so much considered a control color. You know, when you think of white, you don't usually think of a control deck, but when you combine them both with blue, you're now in a control theme, and a lot of people will play control decks, even in Commander, especially in other formats, but even in Commander, people will tend to lean towards a control strategy when they are playing an Esper deck. And the reason why is because, of course, you have access to counterspells because you are playing blue. If you're playing a control strategy, it's a lot easier to do so if you have counterspells, but you also need a lot of great removal if you're playing a control strategy. And of course, because you have white and black, you have access to all the best removal in the format as well. In fact, again, if we're combining colors, Orzhov, black and white, has a lot of the best removal options in the format. So of course, because you're in Esper colors, you're going to have access to all those fantastic removal options in Orzhov colors. You're also going to have access to all the best board wipes in the format. You're going to have those great white board wipes. You get Toxic Deluge as well. You also get Cyclonic Rift. So you got all the best board wipes. You got all the best targeted removal, and as well, you're going to have counter spells. So dealing with what your opponents are doing in a Commander game is not going to be an issue for you at all if you're playing an Esper deck, or certainly shouldn't be. Another thing that you're going to have access to, which is going to help you in the control strategy, is protecting your own stuff. Again, because you have access to white, you have a lot of the best protection spells as well. I mean, you do have counter spells again, which can be used as protection spells, but you also got your Teferi's protection, your blacksmith skill, that kind of stuff as well, which can lean towards a control strategy of keeping on the board whatever it is you want to be doing to move towards victory. Getting into some other things that you want to be doing in your Commander deck, though, is card draw. And you know, it's interesting when you start talking about card draw in Esper colors, because of course, black and blue are traditionally really, really good at drawing cards in the Commander format. But if I'm putting an Esper deck together, I probably will be using white options as well. That's how good white has gotten at card draw in this format. Regardless of what I'm doing in my Esper deck, it's going to be very easy for me to put an Esper Sentinel or a Archivist of Ogma in my deck. Even though black and blue are considered to be the better card draw colors, I think that these are two of the best options you can have just as generic card draw. Gonna make a card draw video right away, and one of the things I'm going to talk about is I tend to lean towards card draw options that are permanents on the battlefield. Stuff that's going to sit there and it's going to just draw me cards over and over and over again without me having to put any effort into it or any mana into it. And both of these cards will do so very, very well. Now, of course, again, it always depends on what you're doing in your deck. Are you playing a life gain deck? If so, well, Lost Dreams is always going to be your best option for drawing cards. Since I don't care about losing life in a life gain theme, a lot of those black options are going to be great for drawing cards as well. But of course, you got all the great blue options also. So really, again, card draw not going to be an issue for you at all in your Esper deck. There's a lot of different directions you can go, and every single color is going to be giving you lots of advantage in that direction. In fact, pretty much all the best card draw options in the entire format are available to you if you are playing a black, white, and blue deck. Let's talk about ramp. And again, this is kind of interesting because if I'm putting an Esper deck together, of course I need ramp. I'm playing a Commander deck, you got to have ramp in there. And again, even though white is seen as a color that doesn't do this particularly well, my ramp is probably going to be mostly white cards. If I want to get lands into play faster than I normally would, I'm going to use white cards to do so. There really isn't any black or blue cards that are doing that. Now, of course, I also have the colorless options, which I will likely do in my Esper deck. I think if I was putting an Esper deck together, I would probably still play Wayfarer's Bauble or maybe Sad Robot. Again, it always does depend what you're doing in your deck. A lot of Esper decks can lean towards an artifact theme, so you might want to use those colorless options because, of course, they're going to be artifacts. So that might fit the strategy of what you're doing. You also got those ritual effects as well because you have black. So if you want to just get things out faster, again, I don't necessarily consider that ramp. It is a ritual option, but you do have the ritual options options in black as well. Of course, if you're not playing green, you're not going to have access to the best ramping options in the format, but other than that, again, you're really not going to have a whole lot of issues doing that in your Esper deck. So not a lot of huge drawback on the ramping as well in an Esper deck. Not really a lot of drawbacks at all as far as I can tell. Again, you got the counter spells, you've got the awesome removal spells, you've got a lot of fantastic card draw options. You can even play cards like Smothering Tithe or Baleful Strix, just great cards in a commander game. And you of course also have tutors, because of course that's something you want to be doing in a commander game from time to time. And because you're playing black, you do have access to tutors. Now, of course, you have access to tutors in the other colors as well. If you want to be searching for maybe instants or sorceries or maybe enchantments, blue and white will do that. So you even have tutor options in those colors. But of course, black does it best. And because you're playing black, you have access to all the best tutors in the format as well. Huge upside there when you're playing an Esper deck. A lot of huge upside here and not really a lot of drawbacks. There really isn't much to talk about with the things that you are limited on in an Esper deck. Now, of course, when we're talking about the 3-color combinations, because you're combining more colors, you are going to have access to more things, more mechanics, more things you can do in a commander deck. So you're not going to have a lot of drawbacks, but Esper might be the best. As far as combining 3 colors together, if I'm picking any 3-color combination, Esper might be the one that I'm not really going to have any drawbacks at all. I can pretty much do everything I want to do in a commander deck well in this 3-color combination. Now, getting to some actual Esper cards that I could throw out there, of course, we're doing removal really well, but you even have access to a fantastic Esper removal spell in Voidrand. White, blue, and a black instant. This spell can't be countered. Destroy target non-land permanent. Of course, you always want to have your removal be versatile in a commander game. This is pretty darn versatile. It's not going to hit the lands, but it's going to hit everything else. I'm absolutely going to include this in my Esper deck if I was making it. I don't know what reason you could possibly come up with for not putting this in, other than the fact that you already have access to a ton of great removal, I guess, but the fact that it can't be countered is a nice little added bonus there. I'm going to throw out Birth of the Imperium. This is a card that really flew under the radar for me, and I didn't really talk about it at all on my channel. There's a lot of cards from Warhammer 40k actually that are pretty darn good that sort of flew under the radar. You know, we got a whole lot of cards all at the same time there, so I might have to revisit this set. This one is a saga, 2 white, blue, and a black. The first chapter, create a 2/2 white Astartes warrior creature token with vigilance for each opponent you have. So likely you're going to have 3 opponents in a commander game. So this is 5 mana. It enters the battlefield and immediately makes you 3 2/2 tokens with vigilance. That seems pretty good, right? Then when we get to chapter 2, each opponent sacrifices a creature. That seems pretty good, right? That's something you're always going to want to do in a commander game. And then if we get to chapter 3, you draw 2 cards for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than you. That's pretty fantastic card draw. This is an Esper card that I think could probably fit in any Esper deck, even if you're doing the control theme, right? Remember, if we're doing a control theme, we likely won't be playing a heavy creature strategy. So this is going to throw out some 2/2 creatures that we can block with. Having your opponent sacrifice creatures, of course, fits the control theme. And then, of course, you always want card draw in any commander deck. And this can actually draw you a lot of cards. You're going to draw 2 cards for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than you. And of course, you just made your opponent sacrifice a creature. And the turn before that, you made 3 2/2 tokens. And also, you're in that control theme. So it's going to be very easy for you to swords or infernal grasp any of your opponents that might have the same amount of creatures as you, so that you can get them down to having less creatures than you, so that you end up drawing 6 cards with this guy. That seems incredible, right? There's a possibility here that you get 3 2/2 tokens off of this, have your opponents each sacrifice a creature, and then end up drawing 6 cards off of it. That seems pretty incredible. I think this card could probably fit in almost any Esper deck. And I will end off with an oldie but a goodie, Magister Sphinx. It's funny, this is a card that I used to see all the time in Commander. It's one of those cards that if you were playing an Esper deck, it was an auto include. Didn't matter what your strategy was. Again, you could be playing that control theme, you could be playing an artifact theme maybe, and this is an artifact creature, so it does fit there. People just auto included this in their Esper decks because it just had a really powerful outcome in a Commander game. If by some chance you've never seen it before, because it doesn't get played that much in the format anymore. It's 4 white, blue, and a black, so it is 7 mana. That's a lot. Artifact creature Sphinx, 5/5 with flying, but when it enters the battlefield, target player's life total becomes 10. People loved this card in a Commander game because obviously the one guy that was doing the best, or the one guy that was maybe bothering you the most, and you really wanted to stick it to them, you play your Magister Sphinx, their life total is say 40, now they just lost 30 life because you're making it 10. It puts their life very close to dying, and of course because you have a 5/5 flyer on the battlefield, that's only 2 hits and you're going to end up knocking them out of the game. If you can recur this, you can use the ability again. If you can blink it, you can use the ability again. You can end up making it so that all of your opponent's life totals become 10. You can make token copies of it to reuse its ability. It really is a great creature in a Commander game. Having a 5/5 flyer sticking around as well is pretty good. Again, because it's an artifact creature, it fits in those artifact themes, which a lot of Esper decks are doing, especially now. Again, I'm giving it a shout out because this is a card that I used to see all the time in Commander games, and I don't really see it much anymore. I see that it is on only about 6,000 decks on EDH Rec, so it has certainly lost popularity. It is 7 mana, that's a lot, but making your opponent's life total 10 can be really, really good, especially against maybe a life gain deck where they got like 80 life. Now you're turning their life total into 10. It doesn't matter what their life total is, right? It just makes their life total exactly 10. Pretty interesting card in a Commander game. Maybe give it some consideration if you're putting your Esper deck together, but that is it. That is all. Talking about the Esper color combination in the Commander format, the cards that I will be playing, the things that I will be doing, and again, I don't think there's a whole lot of drawback here. Esper is a pretty fantastic color combination in the format. Not really a whole lot of things that you can't do. And again, because removal wins games, you have options for dealing with whatever it is your opponents are doing, and then on top of that, you got the counter spells as well. What are cards that you're going to be auto-including in your Esper decks? Let me know in the comments below, but that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.